Hello you wonderful YouTubers, welcome to my channel, Tiger Rose Rides, and welcome to what I think is going to be a special history today. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank the King's Theatre, especially the three people, and that's Julia, Chris and Pete, for allowing me to do a piece on the King's Theatre in Portsmouth, but also for Chris and Pete for giving me what was a fantastic tour and a great education on the King's Theatre itself. They literally took me in every little cubby hole they could possibly find, and it was great. I loved it. So that's to come. What am I doing right now? Right now I am going to the old Winchester Hill. The reason I'm doing this is I take you around these back streets of the South Downs, but because of the trees and everything, you can't really see much of it. So I'm going up on Old Winchester Hill, which has a fantastic view. Not the best one I want. The one I want is on the 12th century, what am I talking about? The Bronze Age settlement, which has a fantastic view on the tip of it. But unfortunately, because it's a notorious place for leaving your bike or your car open to thieves and such like, but I daren't go too far away from it. So literally a 1 minute walk away from my bike gives me an excellent view of the South Downs. So hopefully I'll add that to this this video today. The history, as I've told you before, I'm only doing local history or bike history. I'm not doing both in the same one. So this week and next week, because it'll be a two-parter, this week and next week I'll be doing the King's Theatre from Southsea and Portsmouth. I'm really looking forward to hearing maybe your comments on it, and let me know what you think. Excuse me. So I'm going to go silent now and get on with it, and I hope you enjoy it. And you would have guessed by now, this week's history is on the King's Theatre in Portsmouth, a theatre that I have very fond memories of as a child when Mum used to take me to pantomime there, or me and my sisters. The one I remember particularly was when I was brought up on stage with my elder sister, and I had to play a trumpet, if I remember rightly. That was a lot of fun. But before I begin, I'd like to extend my sincerest gratitude to 4 individuals who played a pivotal role in this endeavour. Firstly, to Julia Worsley for her kind permission to allow me to conduct research and create this video. Secondly, my heartfelt thanks to Chris Grant and Pete Rann for dedicating their time to provide me with an exceptional guided tour. Chris and Pete, the archivists at the King's Theatre, displayed immense knowledge and passion for the theatre, which greatly enriched my experience. So thank you both for a splendid education. And lastly, but by no means least, I'd like to thank Aaron McKay-Thomas, who's doing something in the background for me and the means of promotion for my videos. So I'd like to thank him for that. So here we go. I do expect this to unfold in 2 parts. The next part being next week, as a brief 15-minute overview would barely scratch the surface and do it no justice whatsoever. As the saying goes, curtain up. There was a theatre impresario called John Bufton. His name emerged in Portsmouth theatre history in 1878 as manager of lessee H.C. Hughes as the Theatre Royal. Following Hughes' death in 1882, Bufton took to the Portsmouth Theatre Company, where his enthusiasm for theatre, coupled with a visionary foresight, enabled him to strengthen his reputation and command respect and authority in Portsmouth's theatre world. This brings us to 1906. Bufton, who had grand plans for a new theatre, the King's Theatre, enlisted the services of the brilliant architect Frank Matcham to design it. The theatre took just 1 year to build and cost £34,000. and opened in 1907 with a rendition of Charles I, starring H.B. Irving. In the Victorian era, theatre was the primary form of evening entertainment. However, Bufton soon realised the necessity for more variety in performances that will maintain interest and audience participation, leading to the birth, I would say, of variety theatre. In its early years, the King's Theatre hosted notable names, and I'm going to give you a list now, such as Ivan Novello, Evelyn Leigh, Margot Fontaine, Rex Harrison, Laurel and Hardy, Laurence Olivier, a young Sean Connery in South Pacific, Irene Handel, bless her, Frankie Howard, loved him, and in more recent years, figures like Engelbert Humperdinck, Diana Dawes, Lee Evans, Brian May, Joe Pasquale, Graham Norton, Brian Connolly, and so many more. As you approach the theatre, the commanding building on the corner of Albert Road immediately catches your eye. The tower adds a sense of majesty to the facade, while the tiled exterior of the entrance suggests grander things to come, and it does not disappoint. Upon entering the foyer, one is struck by the grandeur of the ceiling, windows, and staircase. Immediately to your left stands a statue of a figure that may be familiar to many. The original statue was placed in top of the theatre until World War II, and then placed on the front portico from the 1950s to the 1980s, when it disappeared during a refurbishment, and she was sold to the Builders Yard, where it was discovered in 1998 and subsequently returned. A naming competition was held, and the winning name was Aurora, which is still her name to this day. But, and not a lot of people knew this, that's my best Michael Caine, her original name was Diana Lucifera. For those of you that are pondering her familiarity, imagine her holding a torch. And I can hear the pennies dropping already. She is the lady from the Columbia Pictures opening scene. A little worn and, let's say, patinaed, she still stands magnificently, embodying the great history of this theatre. On the far side of the foyer is a grand staircase. Interestingly, the individual stairs are not very high. This is because in the Victorian era, when people would dress up for an evening at the theatre, ladies would be trussed up in heavy restrictive dresses and corsets, which made it very difficult for them to negotiate taller steps. So, these days you can almost glide up them, and when you get to the top, the urge to do a dance number down them is hard to resist. Still in the foyer, if you look up to the wonderful ornate ceiling with its angel reliefs and paintings, you can quite easily give you a neckache. Couple that with the smashing windows that surround it, although smashing is probably not the right word, it really does give you a sense of having just walked into the reception of a palace. In the 1920s, film was now the go-to entertainment, and so the theatre, still keeping live shows as a priority, would convert to a cinema to show the latest blockbuster. This continued into the 30s with such stars as Ivan Novello on screen and on stage. In the 1940s, during the war, the King's holds an ever-growing programme of shows and concerts to maintain morale during the war years. Interestingly, Portsmouth was heavily bombed during the war because of its military importance, but the theatre, with the exception of an incendiary bomb which did no real damage, was never bombed. And this is because, as legend would have it, the German Luftwaffe would use the building as a route marker to keep them on track for the docks, and so the pilots were ordered not to bomb it. Also at this time, the Guildhall had been severely burnt out and damaged by the bombing, so all of the planned concerts were moved to the King's. Before we go into the seating area of the theatre, I thought I'd take you onto the stage. Just as a point of interest, the curtains on the stage were originally by Frank Matham's design, which was green and gold. It was later that the main curtains changed to red with the signs you see on them today. Also, the upper palmet above the curtain has the Portsmouth crescent moon and star, which was all hand-stitched and raised from the cloth. This is the original green colour still. And another interesting point, and there's a lot of them, the star and crescent symbol has been used by the city of Portsmouth as its coat of arms for at least 700 years, and is mentioned in the heraldic visitations of both 1622 and 1686. The thing that struck me the most was that the floor was rubber. It was made of rubber, which I thought ballet dancers would have a problem with, doing their pirouettes and stuff. But Chris and Pete assured me that they managed very well. Also, I learned that the stage sloped down from the back to the front, and this was so certain areas, especially the close-up ones, could see the whole show and not just the front players. Also, it's where the term being upstaged comes from, as the players at the back of the stage would be higher than those in front. The view of the seating where the artist could see at full capacity of 1,500 people is amazing. Not the biggest theatre in the UK, but a daunting sight to be performing in front of all the same. Another interesting point, and there are lots of them, in the Victorian era even, the first few rows of seats would be for gentlemen only to sit, so they could readily be able to see the ankles of the dancers close up. Ah, the good old days. How times have changed. I was taken to the stage door and the actors' dressing rooms and a laundry room. And as you can imagine, all the sweating on stage made for smelly costumes, so it's just as well they have one. I was surprised how basic the changing rooms were. You would expect that the top stars would be expecting more, luxury. But Chris told me that often they bring their own comforts with them. There was one tiny room stage right. It was for the actors to do a quick change. But strangely, there was a tiny little door in the wall. And it turns out that it opened into the back of the bar where they would be slid a drink before they went back on the stage. Chris and Pete took me under the stage, and it's here that we will now quash a rumour. It is said by some that the stage is floated on water, and that orchestra members have to row to get into the orchestra pit. It's all rubbish. There is a small spring running under the stage that is constantly pumped to stop it getting out of hand. But there is no call for boats and never has been. I also saw the pit, or the trap door, so villains could make their usual mwahaha appearance in a cloud of smoke. There used to be a sinking grave one as well, which I thought a little bit macabre, but there you go. Like all theatres, there is a lot of scenery and equipment which often spills under the stage, as you can see. The 1950s saw life getting back to normal after the war. Rationing still existed and much building repairs needed to be done, but it was getting there. One thing still remained, as always had. The King still put on many productions of big musicals of the time, and many actors had been to war were back in the entertainment. New actors took to the stage, one of which was Sean Connery in a production of South Pacific. In 1964, Mrs. Joan Cooper purchased the theatre with her own money and ran the theatre with her husband, Commander Reggie Cooper. Commander Cooper died in 1987, and Mrs. Cooper brought in local businessman Mr. Ivor Barnes to run the theatre. Throughout the 60s, the good times continued in the King's, a great range of musicals, operas, ballets, and special fly-in matinees by the cast of the West End Theatre. In 1990, Mrs. Cooper sold the theatre to Portsmouth Council. I'm going to leave the history here for this week. I want to do it justice, and I can't really do that in a 15-minute slot. So part 2 will be next week. But before I leave it, there is an open day on the theatre in 16th of March 2025. You will have to go online closer to the day, but it's a date for your diary. Okay, I promised you a view of the South Downs, so here is a quick panoramic view of what I could see without going too far away from my bike. So there is an Iron Age settlement, burial mounds and all sorts over there, and this is the South Downs.
That's Pompey just over there, and then Southampton just over there. It's beautiful, right on my doorstep. So that's what you would be able to see if there weren't so many trees lining all the roads around here. But unfortunately, it is what it is. So we have places like this that look out over the lot, and it's wonderful. Anyway, so there you go. That is some of the South Downs. I say some because it goes all the way to past Brighton, or up to Brighton that way, and then all the way to Winchester that way.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the first half of the King's Theatre. I say half, it might even go into 3 episodes. Who knows? So that's it. Take care, ride safe, and I will see you next week, hopefully.